Want to call this meeting to order. This is the Board of School Directors Education Committee meeting. It is 6:01. We're in the Cardinal Room, and today is, what is today? March 7th. It's not May yet.
I always say May.
Are there any, our secretary's not, are there?
There are no announcements this evening.
No announcements, minutes.
I did send them via email to
Okay.
the committee today.
Anyone who has any changes, we'll send them to Brooke. Okay, Dr. Wheeler, do you have an update?
Yes, just briefly. This committee previously received a presentation from Principal Schultz of Upper Dublin High School. Okay, I will begin again. This committee previously received a presentation from Principal Schultz of Upper Dublin High School addressing intent to change the grading scale for the high school by adding pluses and minuses to the existing grading structure. Adoption of this revision will require a change to Board Policy 214, computing grade point averages. On February 29th, the Board's Policy Committee reviewed and discussed a presentation about this proposed change from Principal Schultz. The committee determined to review this proposal with additional information from Principal Schultz on March 28th at their next meeting. If this policy change is forwarded to the full board for legislative action, that will not take place until the April 11th legislative meeting. Just wanted to inform our stakeholders of where we are. I know there's been some interest in that proposed change, and the timeline we're on now, again, is return to Policy Committee on March 28th and possible action on the April 11th legislative meeting agenda. Thank you.
With everyone's permission, we would like to modify the agenda and switch number 2 and number 4 so that the next presentation will be the Sandy Run survey presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Ludwig.
Just check your microphone when you get a chance, Dr. Clark. So I didn't hear you.
All right, how's this? Can you hear me?
You have to move a little closer.
Okay, can you all hear me now?
That's good,
Is that
thank you.
better? Good. Thank you for giving me time this evening to share with you the results of a survey that we recently, December, we issued to all of our students, grades 6, 7, and 8. It's always an enlightening time when we get to hear the student voices collectively. Face-to-face is always preferred. However, the survey that we pushed out in the 3 grade level Google Classrooms netted us some valuable information that informed us in many aspects of our work at Sandy Run. We had 2 goals in mind when the 3 counselors and the 3 administrators in the building created the survey, 13 questions in total. We wanted to ascertain student concerns and the overall climate through the student lens as well. It was an attitudinal focus, right? How do you feel about certain things? And we looked at how they prepare for school, not only with bedtimes, but also on how they charge the Chromebooks in the evening, right? All those things that it takes to have our students well prepared to embark on their school days. We had a combination of multiple choice, short answer, and Likert scale questions. And out of 919 students at Sandy Run, 830 responded for a whopping 90.3%. And we issued this during a 30-minute extended homeroom schedule. Each grade had 1 day in December during that 30-minute window to respond to the 13 questions. The results have since been shared with Dr. Wheeler, our faculty at a recent faculty meeting, my Student Advisory Council, otherwise known as PLPC, the Principal's Leading and Planning Committee, and our Food Services Director, Mrs. Deli, because many of the questions and the students responded to desired changes in our food services and cafeteria. I've shared with you 5 of the, I think, the most poignant questions, I think, and most eye-opening results. So I've shared with you this evening 5 of our 13. I'm not sure if you can read that from your seats. I'll read that to you. Which of the following would you consider to be positives at Sandy Run? The top positives were sports, activities, technology, and friendliness. Some of the not-so-positives are addressed in a later slide. Which of the following areas do you think needs the most improvement? Cafeteria and food was our overwhelmingly top response. Facility and building, second. And our third was student behavior. So our kids are paying attention, and they care what they're eating, they care where they spend their day, and they're observing their peer behavior. What time do you normally go to bed on a school night? The majority of students said between 9:30 and 10. So this is information for our counselors to share when they're individually talking with the students, because certainly research shows that at the age group we have at Sandy Run, 9:30, 10 o'clock is too late. If you have a cell phone or iPad, where do you keep, store, or charge it at night? The majority, 67.2%, said in their room. So when we get concerns about things that happen on the weekend in the chat rooms and on different websites, it's incumbent upon, I think, parents to take a look at where this device is stored overnight, because I'm guessing some of that communication takes place out of their parents' purview. Are you excited about coming to school each day? Interesting bell curve there. Number 1 on the bar graph shows that that's a definite no, that's 7%. And at the other end, we have 2.7% that said definitely yes. Now, granted, this is a week before their December break, so I'm sure that may have skewed our results a little bit, but we're happy about that 31% that is leaning a little bit towards the yes, not quite now. How do you perform as a student? How would you rate yourself? 458 students out of 830, 55% say that they are a hard worker and they're doing very well. I think that's important, especially, and we've divided this, disaggregated this at school by grade level, because obviously it's important that our 8th graders especially have a firm grasp on what their abilities are and what their talents are as we send them on to Mr. Schultz and his staff. Here are some student comments regarding the building. Can you read that? I don't want to have to narrate to you. But I swear I didn't write these comments. Our children sometimes see things through the same lens as we.
Just to clarify, Dr. Clark, these are
Yes.
verbatim, so when we get into
Correct.
some typos and grammar issues, these came right from our
Correct.
students.
Correct.
And we'll work on correcting all of that.
Yes, these are all verbatim. No spelling check, no redlining corrections were made. The ever polite child here responded, "Thank you." For listening, and we always listen. Here are student comments about the food selection and cafeteria, and yes, these were shared with Mrs. Deli, and she responded in kind. We just recently hired a new cafeteria director. Are you laughing at the Chick-fil-A comment? Yeah, they spelled it wrong, but that doesn't matter. Mrs. Deli said that we will not have Chick-fil-A. However, she did share with our newly hired cafeteria manager that, you know, we need to take into consideration many more of our students' desires, and I think increase the interest level, talk about nutrition and wellness month, have contests. Her plan is to put up, Andrea Daughtry is her name, plans to put up more student posters in the cafeteria to make it a more friendly place. Not that it's unfriendly, but there are things that we can do to improve. We also have just implemented a 2-week rotation for our menu. Used to be 1 week, so it seemed redundant and repetitive, but the variety has already started, and this is only her 3rd week in our cafeteria. Yep, she addressed number 3 already. Student comments about student life in general. sports in sixth grade is a PIAA concern. That's a PIAA oversees grades 7 through 12 participation. So we're going to look at perhaps bringing back intramurals to our sixth grade students, because I think more than just this one student would like to participate in athletic space. And we do have a lot of clubs where, in fact, we opened up 3 brand new ones this year based on student interest. So student brings their desire to me. We share it with Mr. Pickford, who works as the director of activities. And if we have a faculty sponsor and enough students to organize, we certainly embark on those. Some of our students who come here from math heard the high school Music Fridays. So we have piloted that on every other Friday at Sandy Run. And jury's still out, but we have the students select the songs that they'll hear every other Friday. So again, it's student choice. And not that adults always know those tunes, but it's what the students want. Just in between passing time, 3 minutes in between each period. Backpacks. The PLPC, the Principals Leading and Planning Committee, they sent out a survey to the teachers asking them if they could have string bags, which is somewhat of a concession as to their no backpack vote that the faculty had last year. So the teachers voted yes to have string bags to at least free their hands up, not necessarily to protect a Chromebook, but it frees their hands up so that they can balance their Chromebook and their other belongings a little bit more feasibly. There's that sixth grade teams and sports club request. And more backpacks. Almost done. Student comments. What do you love most about your Chromebook? Mr. Vinograd was happy to see some of these things. We couldn't have said some of these things better ourselves. Better communication and more fun learning. There it is. Hello. Hitting the nail on the head. Homesick and know what's going on. It's awesome. Can get work done faster? Yep. Being organized? Mm-hmm. The personalization.
Yep.
Obviously a student who's purchased theirs.
That's it.
It's because at a glance they know where theirs is. It is helpful.
Mr. V's favorite comment.
Right.
Yeah.
Free response. These are comments. Anything else you want to add was the prompt. I'm sure, Phil, this was just one student who still wants papers in their hand. Correct. In our PSSA, the middle school will still be paper pencils, so it's important that. It's like a wedding, something new, something borrowed, something Google. Mm-hmm. Surveys are kind of long. Imagine that. This last bullet is obviously from a Netflix or Spotify user. Netflix, well, we don't think kids should have the opportunity to watch TV series or movies during the school day, even during advisory. So, Phil, correct me if I'm wrong, but Netflix is accessible beginning at 3 p.m.?
It is.
Yeah.
Although there are exceptions. Half days, snow days. There are several hundred students who have taken it on themselves to make me aware of all the schedule that happens throughout the year. We're very, very respectful. Dear Mr. Beaver, appreciate how busy you are. They're all.
Student voice, you gotta love it.
And they have great choice, right? House of Cards.
Personal favorite, I guess.
Or I want to binge this weekend.
All right, walking through the breezeway is terrible when there's bad weather. This is true. I am having a lot of fun so far at SRMS. Mr. Schultz, this one is for you. The hope is that the teachers at the high school are cool, like the 8th grade teachers. So, action planning. What have we done as a result of this December survey? The PLPC, Student Advisory Council, has put suggestion boxes around the school so that we can capture these voices on an ongoing basis. It's kind of cute because the box in the cafeteria, they all address food, right? The one in the library addresses all the library, which is okay because they're aware of where they are, but we're looking across the building to make changes, that enhance the student experience altogether. Food services update. Like I said, we took that to Mrs. Deli and to Mrs. Daughtry for immediate changes. Guidance suggestions, again, many of these comments and survey responses have become the fodder for counselor conversations that are very specific and targeted. This information also shared with teachers will allow them to, during their team meetings, to revisit how they communicate with children, how they communicate with parents, and are they asking similar questions so that they get similar feedback from the children. It's not just about what they're getting academically, but the overall experience. Middle school's principal council was rejuvenated via the IU, so every other month I have the opportunity to share with my colleagues around the region, and we collaboratively solve problems, some of which were mentioned here. Also, ongoing survey opportunities because there are questions on which we'd like to drill down and get even further information if they don't come via the suggestion boxes, et cetera. Okay, and that concludes our overview. If any of you would like to see the entire survey, all 13 questions and the responses, I'm happy to forward that to you as well. Just wanted to give you a glimpse this evening, a thumbnail of our children.
Thank you. Were there a lot more text responses, you just picked them, or was this pretty much it?
No, there were many. I picked the ones that were specific and targeted to the areas that we could immediately address, like the cafeteria, et cetera.
Okay.
But all of them were relevant, and they took it seriously. Like, we didn't get any of the Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck type questions. Not that they'd know who they are anymore, but they were very honest with their responses. And I think that maybe because they know Mr. Vinogradov can see who said what. They're aware.
Big brother.
Could, does anyone else have any comments or questions, especially the committee? Not being a Sandy Run recent parent, it's been a few years, could you elaborate on the backpacks and the, what are they called, rope bags, string bags?
Yes, when I first arrived in 2014, many of the parents as well as 8th graders asked me, why don't we have backpacks? Is that something you as the new principal can change? So of course I went to assess why don't we have them and find out the history. So when I spoke with IPD and our various building teacher leaders, they said because they take so much space in the classrooms, and if they're in the hallway, they become a fire hazard, et cetera. So I said, well, let's survey the teachers. So again, we put out, we didn't have Google surveys at the time. I think it was a Survey Monkey back in 2014. And indeed, the same responses came. We got to observe and pilot the 8th grades with backpacks, and they indeed are crowded in the classrooms. The lockers are small, so if the kids can keep their backpacks, many of them don't fit in the locker. So when they bring them to the classroom, even before the pilot, sitting on the hall on the perimeter of the classrooms and in between the desk, it provided a tripping hazard not only for the teachers but the students who were moving around and working in small groups. Nevertheless, I said, okay, well, let's take a look through the 7th grade pilots. The second month, we piloted 7th and 8th grade with backpacks, and it was a tripping hazard. You could see them in the hallways. Kids would just stuff and jam everything they possibly could in there, seemingly forgetting all of their organizational skills that have been built up. And then when it became time for the 6th grade to pilot it in month 3, they would leave them in the cafeteria, then have to run back from the annex to get them, et cetera. So we did a follow-up survey after our 3-month pilot, and the teachers overwhelmingly, like 85%, said, no, we don't think it's a great idea. So then fast forward to the PLPC student group, and they're saying, well, we really want backpacks. It does train us for their use at the high school. So the, I guess, meeting in the middle was the string bag proposal, which teachers overwhelmingly voted yes for. So far, they're successful. Mr. Vinogradov would still like us to reduce the number of Chromebook damages, but we also know that because our kids travel to 2 buildings, I also know it's the grade level, the age group that they're in, and no backpacks makes us different than any other building K to 4 or 9 to 12. So I'm asking him to keep that in perspective, and we'll continue to address the Chromebook damages.
At a recent technology conference for all of Pennsylvania, tech directors have an opportunity to commiserate on our challenges. And so the good news is we compared damage rates, and our 7th and 8th grade are really not that bad, given the fact that they don't have backpacks. It's actually quite surprising. So it really does follows the maturity curve. 5th grade, almost no damage. Seniors, almost no damage. And then in the middle, whoop, 7th grade, down. And so it just follows that maturity curve. It's just really the nature of the age. Yeah, that's all.
That does my heart good, Mr. Vinogradov, thank you. And I misspoke, I said K to 4 buildings, obviously K to 5 buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clark.
Thank you, Dr. Ludwig.
You may sit down, and then you can get back up again for the next the next topic, which is the Sandy Run schedule proposal.
Good evening, everyone. We're here tonight to lay out our proposal to examine Sandy Run's bell schedule. So when we mean Sandy Run Middle School Schedule Review Proposal, we are proposing to put together a committee to take a look at Sandy Run's bell schedule and make some recommendations to the school board for the 2017-2018 school year. So we just want to begin by talking about a scheduling overview, sort of what is a schedule, sometimes referred to as a bell schedule. A schedule is certainly a means to an end, but not an end unto itself. It is based on the curriculum, and the schedule includes coursework that is both required or elective. And I think point number 3 may be the most important point, which is that the student experience that arises from the schedule defines the school experience, and that all of our students' needs warrant consideration. Students are not the only humans in the building. There are teachers, and their need to collaborate professionally on behalf of students should also be included. And strikingly important is that a schedule must begin with the mission and vision statement of the school district. So I've included that. And this is our Upper Dublin mission statement, which is the mission of the School District of Upper Dublin is to provide a safe environment in which all students are respected, educated, encouraged, and challenged to become lifelong learners in a global society. I also added a very important line from Dr. Wheeler's goals, and I believe it is turning into a bit of a mission statement on its own, nothing official, but certainly very, very important, which is that all students can and will learn through equitable means. So from that, I'm going to give Dr. Clark an opportunity to move forward with a more detailed description.
Scheduling paradigm, and this exists in scheduling research, where it's a triumvirate. At the core of all that we do to build a schedule are the students. We have to take into consideration, giving all of them equal consideration, the curriculum, our staffing, and the facilities. Our current schedule, you might gasp when you see this, but our current schedule has been in place since 1985. So there are obviously our students from 1985 are probably married with children, so their needs are, our current children's needs are not being met, we believe, as well as they should be. We currently have 7 instructional periods, each 46 minutes, in addition to homeroom, which is 5, and advisory at the end of the day, which is 47 minutes, passing time 3 minutes, and we have 3 lunches, grade level lunches, each of them 30 minutes in length. Advisory, our current 47-minute end of the day period, is a time for teachers and students to work together reviewing tests, starting their homework, completing missed work, conferencing with their teachers, gathering data and analysis of that data, progress monitoring, and large group music practice. 6th grade, I'm going to walk you through what 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. There are minor differences at each grade level. Double period of English language arts in 6th grade, and 46 minutes a day devoted to math, social studies, and science. 2 days out of our 6-day cycle, students rotate through health or PE. technology ed, which is computing or technology, art, music, family and consumer science, and world language exploratory. And world language exploratory students don't receive a letter grade, they just get a satisfactory plus or minus. In 7th grade, in each of these 5 core subjects, students get a 46-minute period. 4 days in the 6-day cycle. This is considered their first year of one language that they choose in the spring of their 6th grade year. And then there are quarterly rotations. We have 4 marking periods, so each one of those is dedicated to either tech ed, art, music, or family and consumer science. And then 2 days in that 6-day cycle, students have PE. Our 8th grade schedule, also 46 minutes a day in the 5 core periods. 2 days per 6-day cycle, health and PE, or writer's workshop. Quarterly rotations, just as in 7th grade, tech ed, art, music, and family and consumer science. I'm going to turn this back over to Mrs. Morrison.
There's kind of a funny educational term that's out there, which is called 21st century skills. And we talk about it a lot, and people have said more recently, well, we should probably just refer to it as contemporary skills. But I do think it has a place because in 2002, so more than a decade ago, a partnership was formed, and that partnership, and you can see the icon there on the right-hand side, the Partnership for 21st Century Education was formed at the turn of the 21st century. And it was a partnership between the U.S. Department of Education and some really major corporations like Apple, Dell, Cisco, Microsoft, Time Warner, National Education Association, to think about what would be needed to equip students for the 21st century. They're still going strong 14 years later, and they've determined that there's some really important skills. And a lot of our challenges that we face in education is that we're preparing students, and I'm sure you've all heard this before, for a future we can't yet imagine. With new jobs being created that we haven't even thought of, so how do we get after that? And when you take a look at that rainbow, I think it's really important to remember that this partnership identified, reading from left to right across the semicircle, life and career skills, learning and innovation skills, information, media, and technology skills, and of course, key subject area skills that we're all very familiar with. Interestingly, the key subject area skills are still very much the same. English, social studies, world language, tech ed, all of the things you've seen. But there's an overlay of those skills, and they're filtered through the 4 C's. We have heard often about the 3 R's, and I think that was at the beginning of our country's journey with education was the 3 R's, and now it's moving forward to the 4 C's, which is about communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. The Partnership for 21st Century Skills also talks about soft skills. So when you see that red part of the rainbow, the soft skills that they've identified that are taught as part of our curriculum, certainly as part of classroom interactions and many other things, include flexibility and adaptation, initiative and self-discipline, social and cross-cultural skills, productivity and accountability, leadership and responsibility. I think all things that we agree are important for our students as they leave Sandy Run and even leave Upper Dublin High School. So when we think about the proposed scope of our committee work to determine what might be the best schedule for our Sandy Run students, we think it's very important that we identify current learning needs of our middle school students, that we are able to survey all of our stakeholders, staff, students, parents, community, that we examine all of the needed supports, whether that is response to instruction and intervention, English language learners, or opportunities for intervention and enrichment, hopefully some needed supports that we haven't discovered yet, and of course to examine a variety of schedules and to visit exemplar schools. The middle school team, Dr. Clark, Mr. Pickford, and Mr. Albert, and I thought for a long time about how we could have a committee composition, and we proposed this committee composition to Dr. Wheeler. We think it's important to have central administration, Sandy Run middle school administration, grade level teachers, allied arts teacher, world language teachers, special education teachers, parents, students, and of course, board member. Did somebody say, did I miss something, Mr. Schultz? Grade level teachers. Okay, just checking. Would you like to join? No, we're very open to possibilities. Yes, we would love to have you. Actually, I'll pause here just for a minute. Dr. Clark will be communicating to the community and parents an opportunity. And I think we've identified a need for at least 4 parents. And Dr. Clark, if you want to just make a comment about that.
Depending on the number of parent responses that we get, we'd like to have a parent represent each grade level, and perhaps from our special areas as well. Maybe someone who themselves is a Sandy Run alumni, maybe someone who has many children in the district, so the pipeline changes they'll see actually enacted upon. And I want to go back for one moment to say that when I first again arrived at Sandy Run in 2014, the overwhelming cry from the faculty was, and the kids as well, was that they wanted to have pure teams, and they wanted not to be cross-team and blended because it afforded students the opportunity to really bond with their team members, as well as the teachers to have common planning time, which is, I think, the crux of the middle school teaming model. So in year 1, we were able to do that, but now that Mr. Albert is on board, who was our scheduling guru, I call him the masterful scheduler, and with Mrs. Morrison's support, we'll be able to dive deeper and really make changes to the Sandy Run schedule to benefit our students in a much more meaningful way. So as well as when we get information from our board members and people who have the long Sandy Run history and the big global perspective of what Sandy Run's needs are, I think it'll be really meaningful conversations at the table that'll propel us forward. And then can I segue right to our... So here's the proposed timeline for our committee's work. March, that's 2016 right now. The middle school learner, when we have our first committee meeting, we will embark on defining what that middle school learner is, as well as how that fits in the Sandy Run specifics. We want to make sure that we're addressing the needs of our kids and preparing them. Although it's a future we're not sure of, we do at least know what they'll be facing when they get to the high school. April, we'll look at the Sandy Run schedule, our current framework, and where and how we can make changes, again, it's all scaffolded to reflect and meet the needs of our middle school learners. May, we'll do a building needs assessment matrix. We'll take a look at the stakeholder surveys that'll be issued, and we'll take a look at those results. And then our work over the summer, we'll probably still be talking about it. However, officially, we will not meet again until September 2016, and we'll apply the needs assessment matrix, taking a look at all the information gathered, and we'll put that in the matrix to make sure that our work continues in 2016 fall in the right direction. October, examine and visit exemplar schedules through that middle school principals council at the IU. We've already talked about scheduling. So some school districts are in love with their middle school schedule, others are not. So as a brainstorm, we will be able to visit their schools, and they might want to visit Sandy Run as well, so that we can all work collaboratively and put schedules together to serve our students' needs. November, we're going to do focus groups. December, review and recommend schedule. So that's the draft point. And then January of 2017, we'd like to come here to the board, and we'd like to have a final proposal to share with you. And then with your blessing or with some additional tweaks and revisions, we will be prepared to implement this brand new, exciting, responsive schedule in September of 2017. There's our goal.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the committee?
Something I didn't see in there. What's wrong with the current schedule?
There are certainly areas that we think that the needs of a 21st century student could be met better. So, for example, in our middle school currently, I believe only 67 days are devoted to technology and computer education over 3 years. And we know how important it is for students to have design thinking skills, coding skills, so we've begun to take a look at that. We see some possibilities for maybe expanding that just a teeny bit even next year, and that might be a discussion point a little bit later on. There are other areas where we believe we could use some more time in mathematics in the 6th grade. I think we would like to have a different approach to providing reading support for students, and probably look at the needs of the students in terms of length of periods. Is it really, are students best served in 6 46-minute periods? Would it be better to perhaps have, and really we're going into this without any preconceived notions, but would it be better for students to have a longer period, for example, in science, perhaps once a week in social studies, just ways to support student learning better? Things have changed since 1985.
Thanks.
And part of that work also, Mr. Sirota, concurrent with Mrs. Clegg's gifted renewal committee work, we may be looking also at how our gifted students' needs are met in our current middle school model. So again, as Mrs. Morrison said, we're going to let the research and the survey results guide us, as well as all the voices who will be assembled at the table with us.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving right along. Our next presentation is regarding co-teaching and instructional coaching.
Again, thank you for giving us this opportunity to present on co-teaching and instructional coaching. Those terms have been brought up several times here at the Education Committee meeting, and I believe last month there was a request to take a deeper dive and perhaps give the school board and the community an opportunity to understand, well, what exactly is co-teaching? What do we mean when we say that? And what is instructional coaching? What do we mean, or what's a model that we're thinking about? Certainly currently in middle and high school, we are already doing co-teaching. It's not a new idea, although we are proposing to expand our co-teaching model at the high school. And we have had a long history of instructional coaching, particularly in elementary mathematics. So just to help give the Education Committee and community some information about these two ideas. So in terms of co-teaching, we're going to define what co-teaching is, discuss some of the challenges and benefits of co-teaching, some of the critical components of co-teaching, and then also provide the different models that co-teaching can take the form of. So specifically, a definition of co-teaching, and if you look at the date, 1989, it certainly has been around for a long time, this idea. And it is an educational approach in which two teachers work in a coactive and coordinated fashion to jointly teach academically and behaviorally heterogeneous groups of students in an integrated setting. And we're discovering more and more that getting groups of heterogeneous students together can be very much beneficial to everyone's learning. Additionally, that in co-teaching, it is when two or more educators co-plan, co-instruct, and co-assess a group of students with diverse needs in the same general education classroom. And I'll now turn it over to Dr. Sandberg.
Good evening. Just to go into some of the specifics in terms of what it would look like for our district, I want to preface this with there are no limitations to what co-teaching could be in terms of who those two educators are in a classroom. You can certainly have a physics class co-taught by two different physics teachers, two people with general ed science certificates. The way that it generally looks, however, and certainly the model that we propose to adopt would involve a general educator as well as a special educator in the classroom. And the reason is pretty simple, I think. We believe that general educators are masters of the curricula. They are masters of what the pacing, the structure of their given art craft is, whereas a special educator really is a master of differentiating to meet individual learners' needs. Certainly in my capacity as a supervisor, I can attest to the abilities of our special education staff. It's that marriage that we think is most productive. And what that really looks like is instruction delivered where both professionals are actively engaged as teachers. We certainly have many talented paraprofessional staff members here who are in the classrooms. And there's a difference between what that model looks like. That model certainly fulfills many of our needs. What we're focusing on here today is how that model can kind of take off to the next step, which is a co-teaching model. So as Ms. Morrison mentioned, the three C's, of co-teaching involve co-planning, co-instructing, and co-assessing. This is principally where we disembark from a paraprofessional in the classroom just assisting and where we get into what co-teaching actually looks like. Ideally, co-teachers co-create goals, co-instruct, collaborate on student assessment, class management, and jointly make decisions pertaining to their group class. Want to talk a little bit about the benefits for students. Research has certainly shown that with good models of co-teaching done with high fidelity, we experience collectively increased individual attention for students, reduced negative behaviors displayed, as well as improved self-esteem and social skills of our students, which we know also from research is necessary to increase academic achievement. There's also, fortunately, many benefits for our teachers, including, but not limited to, increased professional development, shared accountability and responsibility, reduced burnout, for what it's worth, and improved morale, which are very good things, as well as increased use of a wider breadth of instructional strategies. We are already in the process of looking towards next year in terms of co-teaching. We know these based off of, we know that there are these challenges based off of the research, based off of talking to our colleagues in other school districts, and we have steps in place for addressing them. I don't need to read the entire list, but we are in the process. I will note briefly that we are most notably involved, I believe it is 6 general education staff, 2 special education staff, and at least 3 administrators at the high school, including myself, are involved in a professional learning community with the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit. And many of these challenges are specific topics that we go into in great detail. I'm going to turn this back over to Ms. Morrison to talk a little bit about some of the approaches in some greater depth.
Very briefly, there are several different models for co-teaching. And you can see that they range from simply having one teacher in the classroom and having another teacher observing. And at first blush, perhaps not the best of all models. Moving to one teacher teaching, one assisting, to this idea of station teaching, parallel teaching, alternative teaching, and team teaching. And before I totally confuse you, here is a diagram with the model. So you can see, it's a little blurry, but perhaps on your presentation it's a little bit better. So in the very best way of co-teaching, you really would have co-teachers doing all of these things sometimes. Of course, the teaming model, which is the lower right-hand side, is the very best, where you have 2 teachers in a classroom, and you literally can't tell them apart. And I have had the opportunity with some of the high school administration previously to visit a local school district where the co-teaching was so seamless in a high school mathematics class that you really couldn't tell who the special education teacher was and who the math teacher was. They worked so well together. But will there be times in co-teaching where one teacher is teaching and one is observing? Of course there will be. Will there be a time when one teacher is teaching and one teacher is assisting? Yes. How about having 2 small groups? Absolutely. Station teaching is another wonderful way to get after co-teaching. I think what's important is that in co-teaching, we provide the resources and opportunities for teachers to co-plan, to co-assess, and then to both be leaders in that classroom. Ultimately, co-teaching builds capacity. It builds capacity because it allows the content area teacher to share her skill with the special area teacher, who will then, from that time onward, be very intimately familiar with whatever that content may be, social studies, biology, English, and that will improve that special education teacher's arsenal, not just for that classroom, but for anything that teacher does in her capacity for the rest of her career.
I would just add, conversely, as I already indicated, I think the special education staff here has a lot to offer in terms of modeling a wide breadth of instructional tools, differentiating. They are masters at implementing what we call specially designed instruction of students, and I think by modeling that to their general education counterparts, collectively we grow as a system, if you will.
And specifically at the high school level, Mr. Michener, the master schedule, is working to provide a team approach where our co-teachers and our regular education teachers, as well as some part-time instructional coaches, can sit together on a regular basis to think about the content, to discuss approaches to specific students, and also if there is a student who may be struggling in some ways, that whole team can get after and support the student. All of this provides a very specific focus on learning.
And I think really what that means to say, what we mean to say with that is when we have 2 individuals, a general education teacher in this case and a special education teacher, who are working collaboratively, they are co-assessing, certainly co-teaching, in that model, it frees up a level of energy that can now be focused less on just, did I deliver this specific curriculum with high fidelity? Did I just differentiate appropriately for that student? But collectively to really provide that energy to focus more on the learning process of all students.
And I'd like to move forward now. We're going to continue our presentation with instructional coaching. Again, why are they paired, co-teaching, instructional coaching? I think those are part of skills around teaching and learning we're discovering as we move into the 21st century, that we've heard so much about coaching, certainly in the area of sports. We know what coaches do, and there are many people who have job coaches. Many people have embedded coaches across different occupations in medicine. There are people who are helping, continuously helping the growth and development. The practice of instructional coaching has been around for quite some time, and I would, not sure, but Mr. Schultz, can I put you on the spot? When did we begin our instructional coaching at the elementary level? Can you remember? So even in our own district, we've seen some real success with instructional coaching. We thought that a good approach for you today is to hear from our instructional coach at the elementary level, Leah Howard. I did put her on the spot a little bit, and I said, you know, find out as much as you can about the Pennsylvania model for instructional coaching, and she's going to talk to us about that, her own experience. We'll have Principal Hultquist come up and talk to us a little bit about what instructional coaching looks like, specifically what Leah's work looks like from her perspective. And then we also have Principal Alston, who has been involved with the professional learning community in partnership with LaSalle University, also around instructional coaching. So Leah and everyone, thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, everyone. So before I begin talking about what an instructional coach is, I want to give you a little bit of background on what PIC is. PIC is an acronym that stands for the Pennsylvania Institute for Instructional Coaching, and it's a partnership of the Annenberg Foundation and the Pennsylvania Department of Education. And it is essentially a statewide resource for developing and sustaining consistent, high-quality instructional coaching in Pennsylvania schools through ongoing professional development and IU coach mentor support. The goal is to work to build teacher capacity as a means of increasing student engagement and thereby improving student achievement. Essentially, in short, I guess I would say it is the best practice model for coaching. PIC defines an instructional coach as someone whose chief professional responsibility is to bring evidence-based practices into classrooms by working with teachers and other school leaders. What this means is it would be the responsibility of the coach to be well-informed and well-versed in best practices and to facilitate and turn around that learning to teachers. Also, I found that it is important for the coach to be a liaison to facilitate communication between the teachers and all stakeholders. The theory behind instructional coaching is that coaching improves teachers' instructional practice and supports teacher effectiveness by promoting better teaching and more student engagement, which in turn leads to better student outcomes. So the instructional coaching model involves two people, the classroom teacher and the coach, and this is a very unique relationship as it's really absent of any type of evaluator. The coaches work one-on-one and in small groups with teachers, providing guidance, training, and other resources as needed. The focus is on practical strategies for engaging students. So the coaches have a really unique opportunity to transform theory into practice, taking into account all the practical considerations that teachers face on a daily basis. Coaches are often responsible for providing or arranging professional development activities for all teachers in a school or district. This could be arranging district-wide professional development, and included in that would be assessing the needs of the teachers and the district currently, and then matching up the professional development that would be most useful at the time. In my role, I've been leading grade level collaboratives to really facilitate discussion about topics of importance in each grade level, and facilitating grade level meetings at team meetings in buildings, at collaboration meetings, and also pushing into faculty meetings as well. The reason why coaching is such high quality professional development is because it is job embedded. So it is responsive to the needs and demands of the teachers, of the classrooms, of the buildings. It is unique and it is tailored. And most importantly, it is ongoing. It is not a one-shot workshop. I've had many opportunities to receive really high-quality professional development, but it's here and then it's gone, and how much that really resonates in daily practice for the long run is kind of up in the air. You're not, you lose things if you don't constantly have access to them. So the fact that it is ongoing and it's embedded within the job makes it a really powerful force in transforming practice. It is aligned to state standards, curriculum, and assessment. And again, the goal is twofold: to improve instructional practice and improve student learning. And I think those two things are inextricably connected. If you improve practice, you will thereby improve student learning. It is important to recognize what a coach is not. A coach is not an evaluator or a supervisor. A coach is not an expert. The coach is not a whistleblower, not a fixer, and not a substitute teacher. That is because it is the goal to promote honest reflection and a safe environment to cultivate growth and to promote risk-taking. The graphic on the screen right now outlines the PIC model. It's separated into 4 quadrants, the first one being one-on-one and small group support. This is where the coaches provide in-house professional development in their buildings, and they consult with teachers through the BDA cycle before, during, after, which I'll get into in just a second. This is ongoing professional learning instead of one and done, as I mentioned before. So this could include one-on-one coaching, in-service trainings, faculty meetings, study groups, data, and planning teams. The second quadrant is collecting, analyzing, and using data. Coaches will work with teachers to collect and use classroom data and formative assessment data. Some data that PIC utilizes is PVOS data, CDT data, and then also classroom-specific data is used as well. And coaches are really teacher leaders in this data-driven decision-making process. Quadrant 3 is evidence-based strategies, and especially as we have transitioned to the Keystone exams and Pennsylvania core standards, it's really coaches' job to provide that professional learning opportunity and one-on-one coaching to incorporate best practices. And PIC also offers professional learning network courses, which provide coaches and teachers with a wide variety of highly effective strategies for engagement. Finally, the fourth quadrant is reflective and non-evaluative practices. And this is the area where teachers are guided through and grown professionally through their work with a coach. And reflection is a essential component of the BDA cycle before, during, after. It's not only identifying a target and figuring out how you're going to implement this change, it's reflecting on the practice as well. That is very important. So as I've alluded to this before, during, after sequence, it is a cycle of communication, collaboration, confidentiality, and collective problem solving. It is in this cyclical process that coaches and teachers work together to co-plan and co-design ways to enhance the students' learning. It is focused on a predetermined set of goals and objectives, and reflecting about what worked well and if the goals and objectives for that lesson were met are an essential component of that process. Jim Knight, who is a leader in instructional coaching and is referenced a lot in PIC, he has developed this big four, determining where to start in coaching, and I share it with you today just to shed light on some of the different areas of focus for the instructional coaching model. So the big four are behavior. The question is classroom management under control? Content, does the teacher understand the content, have a plan, and understand which information is most important? Instruction, is the teacher using teaching practices that ensure all students master content? And formative assessment, do the teacher and students know if students are mastering the content? So the work of the coaching relationship can really focus in any four of these areas. I've adapted this model, and it's funny that the model, it's actually quite coincidental that the model that I've established for coaching is very much aligned with the model that PIC promotes as best practice, because I, again, have just become familiar with PIC. So it is very cool, I guess, that our ideas are aligned. My model for elementary math coaching is that I, instead of past coaching experiences that I've been a part of have been one day a week or one day a month on a kind of a year-long basis. And I thought that it would be more effective to identify 5 consecutive days in a teacher's schedule and then gradually release the responsibility of the teaching to the teacher within those 5 days. So in the before process, in the before section of this process, the teacher and the coach, myself, would agree on a focus. So for instance, it might be strategies for engagement during fluency work, or maybe using the pictorial representations that we're becoming more accustomed to, tape diagrams, area models, number bonds, to model problem solving, as these are all new ideas and new strategies that teachers are trying to implement in their classrooms. Then in the during phase, that's where those 5 consecutive days come in. On the first 1 to 2 days, I would model the planning and instruction while the teacher would observe. And I think any teacher that you speak to about the process of being able to sit back and watch somebody else teach, they'll always tell you that it is one of the most enlightening and eye-opening experiences they have. And they get such little opportunity to do that because of schedules. days 3 and 4 within this cycle, the coach and the teacher would co-plan and co-teach. There's that gradual release of responsibility. And then on day 5, the teacher plans and teaches while the coach observes and then provides feedback. And finally, after that, you would have a session together where you would reflect on the entire process. I find it useful to have an immediate reflection on the process and then a follow-up reflection on how implementation is going in the classroom. I also wanted to share this chart by Joyce and Showers. It shows different steps of the training process and then how effective it is in terms of knowledge mastery, skill acquisition, and classroom application. And as you could see, coaching elicits the best and most effective results in terms of knowledge mastery, skill acquisition, and classroom application, where Joyce and Showers are citing that 75 to 90% of teachers report very high retention or practice of classroom application. And finally, I wanted to share a study that is part of a larger research effort that focuses on a coaching model designed by PIC. The truth of the matter is there is not that much research currently out there on instructional coaching because it is newer in practice. But this teacher study explored the effects of coaching as perceived by the teachers themselves and perceptions of how these experiences affect instruction, student engagement, and student learning. And as you could see from the results, the impact on engagement from fall 2012, 97% of teachers perceived an impact on engagement. And then in spring of 2013, 99% of teachers cited a impact on engagement in their classroom. And what that's showing to me is that from the outset, teachers buy into how this can positively affect their practice in their classroom, and that those who didn't immediately buy in a year later, most of them have kind of crossed that line and seen the benefits of it. And the same with the impact on learning. 90% of teachers cited examples of instructional coaching having a positive impact on learning, and that increased to 98% in spring of 2013. I also wanted to just mention that other observations included in this study were that changes in classroom practice. Teachers observed a willingness to try new instructional techniques, reflecting more effectively on their practice and increasing opportunities for cooperative learning. In terms of changes in student engagement, teachers observed feeling a greater number of students are engaged, students sharing more among themselves, students being more active in group work, and students being more engaged. Finally, in terms of changes in student learning, teachers observed demonstrating ability to make connections with prior learning, demonstrating deeper understanding of concepts, and thinking more broadly about materials. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to hand this over to Stephanie Holquist, and she's going to share a little bit about her leadership perspective on instructional coaching.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. And I'm going to try and read my notes from my phone, so bear with me. I wanted to make a connection to the coaching model. Actually, first I should thank Leah for the work she's put forth for the district in our building, and certainly I'm sure the other elementary buildings as well. As a former coach for the district, I can empathize with your struggles and frustrations and share in the success you feel when you see teachers benefit from the experience you provide them. So from that lens, as a instructional leader for the building, I like to try and tie back what she's doing in part and the staff are doing in part and how the teachers are responding in part to Danielson's domains. So I only have one slide, and the slide you see up here includes the 4 domains of Danielson's practice. And what I've done within those domains, there are a couple that are on stage. Those are when the teacher is teaching and the students are learning, and there is this different type of instruction happening. Those are domains 2 and 3. And the offstage domains, when they're preparing for that moment of learning. And you can see the impact of both co-teaching and instructional coaches in particular within the domains for the staff. And I wanted to point out a few examples. So just to get your heads around what you're looking at here, domain 1, the component title is planning and preparation. And then we'll look at an element within that domain, and this is a part of the rubric we use for principal evaluation. So a lot of these things we're looking at when we get into the classroom to help inspire growth. And then I'll highlight some evidence with a picture prompt of what that looks like, and partly what Leah is doing, but partly the benefits that she is helping reap with the staff and students. One more point, the arrow above. Danielson identifies growth as moving along a scale. And the concept for the district is we want to become more proficient in our efforts to the extreme end of being distinguished, which is certainly somewhere we visit, we know that. But through her process in this work, she can help staff and students move on that spectrum and feel safe if they're not necessarily meeting with great success the first time. So it's kind of a nice comfort there. So we'll stick with domain 1, planning and preparation, demonstrating knowledge of resources. And I have a picture of a Google Classroom here because I don't know if you're familiar. She's certainly very humble and probably wouldn't say all this, but Leah has put together a great deal of online digital resource classrooms, K through 5, for our staff. She's come down during collaboration meetings to meet with our teachers to review lots of documents, PSSA documents, omission documents, consolidations for Eureka documents, pacing guides, Zern resources for parents and teachers. And that is a huge help for the planning and preparation on the teacher's behalf. And there's a certain relief in having those very solid resources. So that's evidence of her work and work that our teachers can benefit from. The second domain, the picture is of a flipped classroom, and I don't think any of us are too unfamiliar with this concept. But the second domain of Danielson looks at the classroom environment. And one of the things that I've noticed in our second grade at Fort Washington, which is one of the few grades that has overall taken on the Zern approach, largely because of a level of comfort and also supply of resources, they're understanding that they have to flip their process of instruction. And in that and through that, it requires of them a certain type of management and an opportunity to create a management environment that is a bit easier to operate and function. The greatest benefit of that process is it allows teachers the wonderful experience of pulling small groups and creating just-in-time instruction based on just-in-time needs. And that is evidenced through domain 3, instruction through assessments. One of the picture here is to replicate the cycle of planning, implementation, and revision, which teachers frequently visit through the assessment process. But with what we've seen in the work that she's provided, our teachers can use now exit tickets a bit more creatively in that flipped approach to provide the data for creating groups of remediation for students to push forward on the Power of Tower or move through continental math problems or other high-end resources, or for the teacher to say, okay, you know what, you haven't fully gained that concept, let's pull a small group, let's do some remediation and work through that process together. There are other ways the assessment appears. Sprints is another way for fluency, but I just wanted to point out that last example there. And finally, in domain 4, another offstage component for our evaluation purposes is through professional responsibilities and creating a PLC, which she has certainly done both digitally and in person. And I have to say it's been neat to see her struggle through and succeed in creating some bonds with staff in a way that builds trust, a lot of things that she had spoken about. The best thing about that is it has inspired people to not just go to her for resources. They're collaborating across grade level, across buildings, and certainly the digital platform that we have allows that to become more possible. So that's it from an instructional leadership perspective. It's a gift for us, and it certainly helps us when we're evaluating staff in terms of understanding the domains and what to look for. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Alston.
Can you hear me? Okay. All right, I want to talk about what's been going on at Fitzwater. It actually began back in the school year of 2012, 2013. We were looking for opportunities to expand our resources beyond just what we had here and looking for partnerships beyond our walls. So it was proposed that we look at what we felt were our greatest needs. And as a team, we decided that coaching would be a possibility that we could look at helping students more. LaSalle was just beginning a program for certification at that point, and they were looking for a partner school, which we gladly volunteered for. At that point, I had selected 6 teachers from the staff that would be a part of the original cohort. These 6 teachers actually went through 3 years of coursework. The coursework started off with reflective practice, because when we looked at our PD, and I will refer back to Leah Howard again, a lot of our PD is that day, and then once we walk away from it, it wasn't lasting and it didn't ultimately benefit children. We needed feedback that was going to be non-evaluative. For some reason, when I walk in there and I give feedback, sometimes people are intimidated. I don't know why, but they just were not as open and receptive when I gave them the feedback, as opposed to hearing from their peers and colleagues. We also wanted to make sure that the cooperating teacher had the opportunity to learn as they were practicing. So one of the things that was exciting about the LaSalle model, the cooperating teacher had an opportunity to take on a student teacher to practice some of the differentiation and the different styles of instructing without having to do it alone, and also without having student teachers that did not have the level of expertise that our more seasoned teachers had. And finally, we have gotten to the point where we are at full implementation. Full implementation at FITS means, for example, we have certain, I can't say full classes, but certain content areas are shared, and that responsibility is shared not only with the special education teacher along with the general education teacher, but also general education teachers working together. And this year will be the first opportunity that I have to do a formal observation of 2 general education teachers with a common lesson, because they have been co-teaching and they wanted to do this together. So I'm really excited and looking forward to that. Mr. Sandberg alluded to what's happening with GPIC, and I don't think he knew at the time that he talked about it how much of the research was done at FITS. A lot of the surveys that were put up a little bit earlier and talking about engagement and all that, the FITS Board of Teachers were some of the people that were paneled. It was a cohort of a total of 12 schools, but I'm very proud to say that we were in that data. Ultimately, the impact has been phenomenal for children. When you look at utilizing resources in ways that have never been done before, when you look at certain stigmas that were out there before, and there was a separation between general education and special education that just, I can't say has been totally removed, but it isn't to the same degree that it was. It is common for children to expect to have multiple teachers and respond favorably to having this great resource that is their teacher. As a way of bringing back in Mrs. Morrison, I know you wanted to talk a little bit more about the GPIC, or are you good there? Okay, so then we'll open up for questions. I can talk to you specifically about what we did at FITS, but if you have questions of anyone that presented, we will gladly answer.
Questions from the committee?
Yeah, I have 2 questions in regards to ratios for both co-teaching and instructional coaching. For co-teaching, does that change the impact in terms of class size if there is co-taught classes in terms of target and cap sizes? And then in regards to instructional coaching, is there also the research in regards to how many teachers that a coach is assigned that does produce maximum output as well in terms of the coaching?
In terms of co-teaching, we use the cap that's recommended by the school board. So I believe at the middle school level, it is up to 27 students, and at the high school, likewise, or is it 28? And so we are thinking with that in mind that there would be, we would count that class size for a teacher and a co-teacher. In terms of research for how many
Just to
coaches-
clarify
oh, yeah.
that, you mean, you're not really changing the class size,
No,
basically?
we're going by the recommendation for classroom caps. In terms of the ratio of coaches to coachees, I'm not sure if research has been done around that. I would say, ultimately, the best model would be to have a coach embedded in a building, so that that person could reach teachers in classrooms in a just-in-time kind of way. Our district has never been able to have the resources to afford that. We've had up to 2 coaches at the elementary level, 2 per building. I believe we're looking at lots of different ways now to embed coaching. For example, at the high school, to have a teacher perhaps be off 1 period a day at a very no or low cost solution to providing some coaching at the high school, so that teacher could coach on the 5th period of her class load. So, but I'm not sure if that's ideal. I think that in the future, perhaps we could get to a higher ratio.
I have a question on 2 of the slides that Dr. Sandberg presented. There's you cite research by Friend and Cook, one which says that the teacher and co-teacher, or the co-teachers, would jointly make decisions pertaining to the class, and one that says shared accountability and responsibility. And I'm wondering, is that generally accepted as the way, or are there other models where one has more authority than the other for final decisions, and how is that kind of thing handled?
Just so I'm clear on your question, before I attempt to take a stab at it, you are asking, I believe, are there other models in which there is not complete reciprocity?
Yeah, and which one's the boss?
I think there are models within the realm of, I think as Ms. Morrison's slides actually suggest, there are some that go as, I don't want to use the word extreme here, so far to one side where there are opportunities for one of the teachers to observe and the other is fully in command. Let's call that 100% in command of the classroom. That is a temporary situation. All in all, in a good co-teaching model, as we see, were you to average it out, it would be equal, if that makes sense.
I'm wondering if that's the general practice, the transition from, I'll call it a traditional model, to a co-teaching model where teachers are accustomed to being the boss, and then they're sharing responsibility. That seems to me to be a big change, and I wonder, what the research says about whether I'm right about that.
I can't speak specific.
I've done it 15 years ago at the elementary level. So, for example, if my class were on, I'm sorry.
Could you come to the microphone?
We're televised. You have to speak into the mic. Thank you.
We did it prior to studying it, but if I had all the learning support kids in my class for a year in 5th grade, I would co-teach with the learning support teacher. He would push in, and we would co-teach. And it was kind of, they've seen it a lot. It's been done, but not in a cohort model. So kids have seen it for decades here.
I'm less worried about the kids than about the teachers.
I think I can speak. I can speak to it a little bit. So I think what's important is that teachers live into a co-teaching relationship. So it has literally been described through our MCIU cohort as a marriage of sorts. So currently we have teachers who are working together to figure out what the model looks like, and teachers can choose from. You saw the variety of models. The best model is that co-teaching team model that you saw. It takes time to get there. It doesn't necessarily happen all at once, but because we've begun much earlier than the school year is beginning, it's giving teachers that opportunity to figure out what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. Ultimately, from a professional point of view, it is a co-teaching, co-grading, co-assessing responsibility. In Pennsylvania, through our educator effectiveness model, that famous circle where half of it is observation and then the other half is data. 15% of the data is the teacher growth model. We actually attribute to each individual teacher the percentage of time that they spend with a student, and in the co-teaching model, it is 50-50.
And I'll jump in with some anecdotal data. So I co-taught at the secondary level for 4 years. I was part of a co-teaching cohort, and then transitioned into being a PIC coach and then a PIC mentor and leader for another 4 years. So it's great that this presentation is one cohesive narrative. It is a relationship, and it is one in which you make an investment over time, and typically, especially for the model that we're proposing here, where we have the general education teacher paired with a special education teacher, there is that shock that happens at first, right? Because I'm master of my domain and I'm used to being the adult in the room, and now there's another adult. I think that happens much more at the elementary level, so it's much more organic, and it's new for secondary. But with training, very quickly you become attuned to the opportunities. And often after that first year through, where now you are both comfortable with each other's different styles and strengths and what the narratives that you bring to the table, but also that you're comfortable with that curriculum, and with the special education teachers is comfortable with the curriculum, the general education teacher has suddenly become aware of a host of strategies that they've seen modeled and implemented with that special education teacher. You transition to if you're looking at slide 11, to that teaming model, but within the context of different lessons that you're running, you'll know that some of those other configurations will work better. And ideally what happens is in that teaming model, the general education teacher and the special education teacher are both very comfortable hopping into any of those roles. So that there were many times I hopped into the observer role, and then I would flip-flop out with my partner. And so it really does expand that tool set to really look holistically at what's best for meeting the needs of all of those learners. But it is a relationship, and the MCIU will be a great resource for that training.
And so I gather the model, the idea is that those pairings are long-term. It's not 1 year. It's presumably
That's the hope.
as long as you can manage it. Yeah.
Just to piggyback on that, are the pairings, using your marriage analogy, are they monogamous or are they polygamous or whatever?
You're going to get us into trouble, Dr.
This is getting
Ludwig.
very interesting.
There are children present too.
I think that is flexible, so the idea is that a special education teacher could co-teach with more than one content area. It's not ideal, but it could happen. Could certainly co-teach with 2 similar content area teachers. We are currently, co-teaching is new to our district, and we have been doing some co-teaching at various levels. And I think that as long as the relationship is working out, then we continue with that particular pairing. And so what's been really great about the work that Mr. Schultz has been leading along with Dr. Sandberg is this opportunity for our regular education 9th grade content area teachers to be part of a professional learning community with our special education teachers or administrators, so they can kind of figure out what works for them and who might be the best pair when we're looking to hire 2 new special education teachers to support the restructuring initiative. In terms of co-teaching, we'll have a good idea of what to look for.
So we've heard a lot of really good stuff about both co-teaching and coaching. Besides dollars, are there any downsides to this? I haven't heard a single one on any of these slides.
It takes time to develop both of these practices. So Mr. Vinogradov alluded to, it takes time to grow into co-teaching. Coaching is a trust-building relationship, and we can't do this, but even if we could put 2 coaches in every building, it would take probably the whole year to build up the kind of trustful relationship for the following year to really see the kind of efficacy that was captured by Ms. Howard. And then there's also just the question of allotment of resources. So in any budget, you have to consider what's most important. And I think some of the conversations that are going on in our meetings include, is it more important to have direct instruction for students? Do we profit more when we have more teachers who can see small groups of students? Is there a long-term profit to co-teaching, to instructional coaching? And so those are all parts of it. So the downside really, I think, to my mind, is the allocation of funds and the conversation around what's most needed at the present time.
Thanks.
I guess one other question I have is the value of co-teaching, or the necessity, I guess, I'm not sure which I want to use, greater if you are changing the curriculum. So the value of Ms. Howard, when we had a new math curriculum, is that greater? Does it diminish over time once you're familiar with that curriculum? Can you then reallocate your resources? And I guess the analogous question for, if it is the case, then is it important when we introduce a new ELA curriculum?
I guess my initial thought, you mentioned curriculum, and I think the focus should be on practices. And regardless in ELA of what collection of resources we may or may not adopt as a district, the idea of differentiating for the needs of adults, the same way we talk about differentiating for the needs of kids. We have 100 elementary school teachers. They're all going to be at different places along the continuum of practices. And so I don't ever envision there's a time when a trusted coach with a nice relationship with the teacher couldn't be valuable. I think it's going to be about prioritizing how we can best meet those needs.
I would also say specifically our district has a history of coaching in mathematics. We've certainly seen other models where there's an instructional coach that can bend according to the needs of the building and or district at the time.
I agree. It's important that we bear in mind that this is not a static one shot in time. Yes, we did bring in a new math curriculum. Yes, we are adopting a new English language, whatever that is going to look like. But as our teachers continue to grow, we continue to learn more about instructional practice and best practice. That's the role that a coach should take on. And that is an ever-living, constantly moving forward project, if you will.
Yeah, no, I think I understand. I guess I was focusing on one of the pieces that Ms. Howard was talking about, which is developing resources and sharing those and building the practice community. Another question I have is, what is the role of instructional coaches vis-a-vis the assistant principals in the elementary schools? Maybe you can make the same analogy at the other levels, but
I mean, I guess I would say that Ms. Howard and Ms. Hultquist both alluded to the communication piece. And so I think from the curriculum office perspective, Ms. Howard has been instrumental in helping communicate the goals and resources that our office can provide to the building level. Whether that's a principal or an assistant principal, I don't think that's much of a matter. I think that's for both of those positions. I think she helps communicate and liaison, and then just around general professional development. And I would need any of our building principals to speak to this because I have never walked in their shoes, but they are juggling many, many balls every single day. So perhaps they're not always aware of the nuances of a particular grade level. And so when we have coaches, that would be their resource, whether principal or assistant principal, to speak to our coach and say, so what's really going on in second grade with this module test that teachers are saying has been particularly challenging for students? And so there's a resource available to help them understand what's going on in that process.
And we look at our assistant principals as additional instructional leaders in the building, as our principals are. Additionally, don't forget, they are evaluating. staff members. So there is a fine line between evaluation, supervision, and coaching, which is strictly non-evaluative. So that's a line that we really wouldn't blur, although, as Ms. Morrison said, the assistant principals are deeply embedded, as the principals are, in what's going on in the instructional focus of our school day.
I guess part of my question, some of the things that were presented, like the PIC model, maybe some of the quadrants would be done in collaboration with teachers, or some quadrants would be done in collaboration with principals, assistant principals. I mean, I'm looking at collecting, analyzing, and using data. And I really thought that was one of the arguments that was used for why we wanted assistant principals in the building. So how do these things get allocated? Because we keep, I'm not really being critical, I'm really asking the question, we keep adding new positions. So which resources, I mean, we're gonna run out of resources, so how do these things all fit together in a way that makes sense, because we don't have unlimited resources?
And I think that in terms of the collection of data, all of us are doing that all of the time. Our principals are doing that, our assistant principals are doing that, and there's certainly a lot of it to, when you think about that just in time, understanding of where a student is and how to move them forward. Coach could partake in that. Currently, we have one mathematics coach for 4 buildings, so she's not ever present, ever available. And I think it is Dr. Wheeler alluded to the specific non-evaluative role of the coach. So it would never be incumbent on a coach to, ask a teacher to look at her data to perhaps have some concerns around what's in that data. But what Ms. Howard or our coach could do is to cooperatively with the teacher who's ready to take a look at the data, help guide, reflect, and understand. So it is a different conversation. And I think we all know this, that when our boss comes to have that conversation, trustful as the relationship may be, at the end of the day, that is our boss. And so it is not always as easy to be honest. It is not always as easy to be open to change, but if you have somebody come alongside of, so in a different capacity to look at data, I think that might be part of the answer.
I have a related question about sort of overlapping responsibilities between, in this case, between coaches and co-teachers. So if the co-teacher is a special education teacher alongside a general education teacher whose specialty is in the way individual learners learn, that seems not that different than the way teachers should teach to deliver that, which seems to be the role of the coach. I'm generalizing a little bit, I recognize, but how do these two things fit together, I guess is the question.
Not every single classroom is a co-taught classroom. So we, even in perfect planning, not every classroom would need to be a co-taught classroom. And also, when you think about it, the co-taught teacher is really constrained to that class the entire time. So if a special education teacher is co-teaching in 5 classes per year, then her range is 5 teachers. An instructional coach's range is much greater than that.
And having also had the opportunity to co-teach years ago when I was in the classroom, it's a great opportunity for colleagues to learn from each other, and it just enhances everyone's capacity. The special ed teacher's knowledge of different learning styles and how to address those, and the content knowledge and the skill of the general ed teacher in pedagogy. It's a beautiful thing, but it is just another way that adult learners can learn from each other. Value added, if you will.
I wasn't questioning the value, just how you put all the pieces together and how you determine, with limited resources, what are the best ways, to prioritize. Any other comments, questions?
Well, I was just going to comment, Dr. Ludwig, that what Mr. Sirota, and I think you've asked too, is that there's a reason why they're in the same presentation, because I think there are similarities. There's a reason why at the high school both approaches are being looked at it will give us some better data and understanding of which approaches are really working and that we prefer over time.
Makes sense.
I have a question if I can. Thanks. Oh.
Yes.
So where are we in the planning process for ninth grade next year? I think that's one of the reasons we asked for our co-teaching presentation. What are we looking at? Because I mean, what you said was the one limitation or the one concern with co-teaching is the transition for the teachers, that relationship building. So just kind of where are we with the plans?
So I believe in January of this year or December, and if Dr. Sandberg or Mr. Schultz, please jump in if I'm saying this incorrectly, a team has been attending a professional learning community at the MCIU. So those would be 6 regular education teachers along with special education counterparts, high school and central office administration to build that team. I believe that plans are underway so that teachers are very clear about who the ninth grade teachers will be in preparation for co-teaching. Mr. Michener is working to have a team time, so that planning time that was alluded to is present, again, with the caveat that it's a complicated schedule and he's working his best to make that happen. And the idea of being able to allocate certain staff members who are viewed as being instructionally very accomplished, if there's a way to adjust their schedule so that they would be teaching 4 out of 5 classes and they could use that 1 period a day to both be instructional coaches as well as to take part in the PIC coaching opportunities at the MCIU. So those are some of the ways that staff is being prepared.
And we also are working with the UDEA to ensure that everyone has a common understanding of the roles that people will be playing. Mr. Schultz, do you have anything to add? You have to go to the mic.
I don't have a whole lot to add to your specific question. I think Mrs. Morrison summed it up pretty well. She also mentioned that Mr. Michener is working on teaming teachers in ninth grade for both the purpose of collaboration, also to make sure that those relationships are built, at the risk of using an analogy that people probably don't want to hear again, to maintain as monogamous relationships as we possibly can. We've been through 1 full-day workshop at the IU around co-teaching. We've had 2 webinars, and next week we're taking the team back for the 2nd full day. This coming Friday, those teachers involved are going to do some planning around that because we believe it is critical rolling it out to the staff that we are giving both a clear message and also the same message. So what type of curriculum work is going to be needed, what type of lesson planning is going to be required, and frankly, a presentation of this nature, what is it and how will it work?
So I think one of the things that you mentioned, Eva, was that when we're looking at pairings, right, that having monogamous, having one-to-one is best. But I think you did mention that it's possible that we could have teachers doing more than one content area.
It is possible. I think the ideal, and I'm not in the intricacies of scheduling, but I think the ideal is to have a teacher being dedicated to biology or English. Is it possible that we could have a special ed teacher who has a strong affinity towards social studies and English? You know, think that it were possible too. So I just didn't want to not include that possibility.
Okay, and that would obviously be on the same team. So the teachers, that special ed teacher that's doing both content areas would be knowing the kids at least. So that would be something that would be in common, even if the content isn't.
That's correct. And then I guess I should just add that in terms of professional development, and again to the instructional coaching one and done, we really are at the end of a almost 2-year arc around differentiated instruction that while it is one and done, every session has led to the next session, has led to the next session. There's been follow-up at the building level. So February 12th, there were certain materials were presented. And then February half day, what's the follow-up on a departmental level? Also on our April 26th Act 80 day, we're actually, and you'll see that in the motion, partnering some more with the MCIU to give staff choice around very deep dives for differentiated instruction. So whether it's the building of assessments or perhaps the idea of really understanding how to further flexibly group students, and of course continued training for our Chromebook initiative. So it is comprehensive, and that's part of it, and I think we don't really mention that enough. Also just curricularly, I mean, I think it was a really good time for us to make this move because a lot of our curriculum for 9th grade is fairly well developed on a backward design basis where teachers have had a lot of input, and we will continue to give them time. Both during the school year, some of that will be necessary in order to be ready, but also during the summer to make sure that those curricular documents are really tight and ready to go. So.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Schultz, schedules will be out when? When's the last time students can change anything? And I know Mr. Mission is working very hard on looking at that.
Schedules don't come out until August. June 1st is the deadline for any type of schedule changes. So he finishes them over the summer. We have students transfer in, so we can't lock into anything until like the second or third week in August. But June 1st is a specific answer to your question.
Right. I mean, one advantage we have is that the 9th grade coming in is a small class. I think it's under 300. Well, do you know roughly what the distribution would be for track 2 versus, I guess, honors? We don't have AP in 9th grade, right?
Correct. We do have the initial numbers for all of that in, well, we're talking about bio, English, and social studies. We have the initial numbers.
Okay. I'm just trying to figure out in how many classes you'll have the co-teaching and how you're going to resolve classes that do not, or will it be partially co-taught? Or is
The plan is to take the level 2 or academic classes and to specifically assign students who may have additional needs or need more support, and those are the courses that we will target for co-teaching. What exactly that distribution is, we're still finalizing. Mr. Michener actually has a pretty good picture of it right now, but again, there are some variations that occur, so we don't want to lock into anything right now.
Okay, and then the other question, the instructional coaches. Did you see then one in each subject area?
We need to post those positions. We need to have interviews for those positions. We don't necessarily see that that is a position that requires somebody with subject area expertise. We believe that instructional practice, specifically around differentiated instruction, is where our priorities will lie. A win-win would be somebody in the content area with the expertise in DI and in GAP. But again, we're prioritizing the instructional piece over the content knowledge.
So maybe I misunderstood. The instructional coach, when you were talking about 1 period a day perhaps, that would be the instructional coach? So they would get just one less period and they would...
Then they'd be available to coach, and you can schedule that in a way so that there's somebody available to coach each period.
Right, but we don't know how many yet with instructional coaches?
How many instructional coaches? We're hoping to have 3. We just had our initial meeting with Mr. Sigafus to look at the numbers so that we determine staffing needs for next year. And right now, it continues to be our hope that we will have 3 instructional coaches that would have 4 teaching periods and a coaching period as their responsibilities next year.
Again, the advantage is it's a smaller class compared to this year.
Correct.
Because if they're teaching one less period, somebody's got to teach that period, that class, or that class doesn't exist.
There have been no elimination of classes.
Well, I
to
mean,
support-
instead of having 10 sections, you're having 8 sections of social studies. So you have more flexibility in moving the staff around. I wasn't insinuating we're going to cancel the class. Okay.
Anything else? Okay. Thank you. Our next subject is the opt-out protocol. Is that you, Mrs. Morrison?
That is I. The opt-out protocol, which you should have in front of you as a separate piece of paper. Unfortunately, there was a gaffe with GAF, and what's printed on the back of your packets is incorrect. So the state of Pennsylvania Department of Education does provide the opportunity for parents to opt out of PSSAs and Keystones for religious reasons. This is simply the protocol that is required by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, and we are making that public.
The bottom line is parents need to contact.
Parents would begin by contacting the school building administrator. Thank you, Dr. Wheeler. Please, you begin with the school building administrator who will guide you through the steps. At the end of the process, you can send an email to my office, and I will be the superintendent's designee. Once all of the steps that are listed on this protocol are complete, our office will send out a no opt-out list to the building so that the building administrators will understand not to test those children.
Are there any consequences if a certain number of people opt out, or does it matter?
It is the prerogative of the parent to opt out for religious reasons.
Just to clarify, this procedure is a state procedure. It's not our procedure, except
correct.
for the names and.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions?
I'm sorry, did we miss, and this will be posted somewhere? Is it on the website?
It will be
Yes.
posted on the website.
It will probably be under the curriculum area on the website.
Okay.
We can put a quick link on the front page, homepage. The most important thing to remember is contact the building principal should anyone have any questions or interest in this.
We have a parent section in the curriculum area of the website, and we can put it there, and we could also put it under the parent tab of the website.
Okay, moving on to our motions. There are 4 motions that we want to discuss and potentially move on to the legislative meeting. I won't read them all because I think everybody's had a chance to review these. The first one is student activities. Any comments or questions on that one? Okay. The second one is Educational Impact Partnership. This one we discussed last month, and I think the only change is to have the agreement reviewed and somewhat edited by our solicitor, and I don't know, are there any other changes?
Well, there is just a slight amendment that you'll see at our school board meeting, which will read, the agreement is attached and subject to approval from the district solicitor.
You mean it has already been reviewed, or it will
It is
be?
being reviewed.
So we'll approve it pending review of the solicitor, which we did,
Pending-
we did. Final review by the solicitor.
After it's signed, or,
Yeah, we've,
you mean we haven't already had them review it?
I don't know.
They are in the process of reviewing it now.
Oh, all right, okay.
So the text we have here is the text we've seen before. Is that correct? Is that right?
No, it's slightly different from the version you saw before.
Okay.
Will the review be completed before the legislative meeting, or not? Before we approve it?
We anticipate that it will, but we just want to make sure that we're covering all of our bases.
Okay. Okay, the third motion is the one that we, Mrs. Morrison alluded to before, the professional development on April 26th. Any comments or questions on that one? And the last one is the conferences.
And I would just like to, there's a correction to the conferences. I believe that Mr. Vinogradov will not be attending SD 2016, is that correct? Or no, That's incorrect. He will be attending.
Surprise.
It looks like
We have,
the correction.
it's the COSIN conference, and that one is going to be in the air until we've resolved that other conference.
The Reston Conference.
So I don't want to be out of the district during the school year, and so I want to choose between one or the other, both very valuable, and I'll know in the next couple of days. So we
Where
have
is-
the COSIN there, but it might come out before legislative meeting.
Where is this this year?
ISTE's in Denver this year.
Originally, I was listed as attending Baldrige Examiner training, actually starting tomorrow. That has been rescheduled. I am not sure if I will be able to fit the 3 days in that they now are designating. I have to get back to them about that. So I may have to postpone that training until the next session that they do. So that originally, if you saw an early draft, I was on there, and we pulled that today.
Will that affect anything with the timing of the strategic planning effort that you're thinking and planning for?
Absolutely not. I'm hoping to get this accomplished before then, but if nothing else, I've had the opportunity to go through the 40 hours of pre-training, pre-work. So I've garnered a very, very good overview of it. My hope is to, at some point within the next 6 months, participate in training, but I'll have to see when that's offered. But I'm feeling very comfortable with this.
Good. Okay, if there are no other questions about any of the motions, we'd like to move them all forward. Okay, community input.
Before we go to community input, unfortunately, my lip reading skills are not very good, and I believe that the principals have been trying to communicate and have perhaps communicated with Dr. Gritzula around parents opting out. So
I think the question was whether or not there are consequences if we do not hit the participation rate, the expectation. We sat through a webinar today from PDE representatives. The reality is it is a parental decision, so we cannot stop parents from exercising that right. If we have a percentage of students that falls below the expectation, it will be duly noted, and so we will be impacted by that to some extent. There are districts that have already been in this situation over the past year or so as parents have opted out and they have found themselves below that threshold. The state has asked them to create an improvement plan. In essence, what they're asking districts to communicate with parents about the importance of participating in a standardized assessment. The reality is there is very little districts can do shy of trying to express that sentiment. If parents opt out and we fall below a participation rate. If there are consequences truly attached to that, we'll have to deal with that. But to date, it has been nothing more than asking districts to create an improvement plan around communication.
Okay. Nobody's lost funding for, okay. That's what I was really wondering. It could happen. I mean, when you read articles in the paper, sometimes.
What funding?
I guess it doesn't matter this year.
Given the
Federal
state of the
dollars, state
budget,
dollars.
Again, it's something that's out of our control, and I think the PDE has to recognize that. We continue to encourage parents to participate, have their children participate, but we will deal with the consequence should a large number of parents choose to opt out.
Guess that's all we can do. Okay. At this point, then, we're going to move to community input. I know it's 5 of 8, but we will listen to any comments from anyone in the community who would like to speak for their 4 minutes.
And I probably won't even be able to stay. So I'm listening to this whole
Closer
thing.
to the microphone.
I was very confused, but I guess at the end, this whole
Your name and-
Ginny Vitella for Washington. This all is 9th grade. This isn't this co-teaching and math and everything else. It was nothing else except for 9th grade, right? That was my question.
if I could just say, we have coaches.
We answer the questions.
Well,
later.
that's right at the end, yeah.
Okay, sorry. So, because if I'm coming from a parent who really has no idea how to teach, But I'm hearing if I have 8 teachers and those classes are filled, and now we're going to have fewer classes, and then now we're special ed in there, I'm not sure how the math is working out. Do we already have these special ed teachers? Do we already have this many special ed children? I'm not sure how the math works out, and I guess that's where I'm confused there. And on a side note, the PSSAs, I love, and I know Jack Vitella does. So might as well start getting ready for the SATs. It's like a final exam, right? And I also hear, and Mike brought this concern up before, a lot of meetings, more meetings and more meetings. And I worry that we spend so much time learning that the kids aren't, they're having subs or not necessarily having all that. And I know from Fort Washington, not Steph, not you, but my observation of aides, this is just a parent observation. The older aides that have been around for special ed, that for the kids that come into the classroom, are very helpful. You don't notice them. They are somewhat seem to be co-teaching. And my more recent observation is those aides, younger, different learning styles, I don't know, they are more specific to one child and not necessarily helping in the classroom. And I don't know what this is heading towards. I guess I just have a lot of questions about this, and I don't really understand why it's necessary and where we're getting the money if this is adding more teachers. I don't know.
Hi, Tanya Colon, Fort Washington. When I get to like third minute, if you put one finger up, thank you. Okay, so I'll start with the easiest one on my agenda is going to middle school and having been a veteran parent here. I think the most important part is that when it comes to, I think it says identify current learning needs of middle school students, it would be for the high school and the middle school teachers to come together and to define the role and the expectations in the curriculum. Because what we're finding is that a lot of our Sandy Run students are graduating or being promoted up with straight A's, and then they get into 9th grade, and it's a reality check, and there's a disconnect somewhere, because then they're starting to get B's, or they're finding that it's harder, which they do know is hard, but the question is to ask to why. If you were that straight A student all throughout middle school, and you're coming in just to your freshman year, what's going on? My conversation with the teachers and the guidance counselors here at the high school is that the amount of rigorous and what they expect is not being held or taught in the middle school. And and I think we've had these conversations before under Dr. Platt's tenure, was to have a better conversation dialect. But what does that look like? For example, document-based questions. I think DBQs was introduced before, because when you came over to the high school, it was just this higher level of analytical thinking skills they wanted for the children to have. But where are you teaching that at? Where is that in the curriculum? Where is that being taught at? The kids just can't walk in one day to the class and say, bam, I want you to think at this high level. So it was thought and implemented to introduce it in the high school, but maybe 2 years ago. I don't know, you have staff in the room, you might can ask them, but maybe about 2 to 3 years ago. With that being said, we're getting the ball rolling, but that's just one piece of the pie that's missing. So I don't want to waste my whole minutes on here, but I think you have to have that crucial conversation with your teachers from high school, department heads to middle school on what does it look like, and implement that in the middle school moving forward to come to the high school so they are where they need to be, in order so you can see the amount of A's, because our district website used to say for our high school students, a lot of them were getting, the percentage of B's in here was higher than any letter grade in our district. So I just wanted to point that out to you. Now, honesty. Someone mentioned that, and there needs to be a lot of honesty in here. I'm very honest, and I'm just going to say that having went through a situation where I asked to see lesson plans, and I had for January, and I had to fill out a right to know just to see these lesson plans over at the high school for a particular teacher, and I'm still waiting on it. As a parent, and for the amount of taxpaying dollars I am paying, and I still haven't been able to see them, I can't trust anything that's being said. And with that being said, mentions, and Mrs. Morrison, no ill will, she comes to these meetings and she puts her heart into it, but she mentioned like how CDTs are supposed to be, the results are supposed to be given to the parents, or given to the child and then give to the parents. That doesn't happen. Then I have to write an email, and then the teacher is feeling some kind of way, and that's brought into the classroom, and that's totally unfair. Same thing with tests coming home. She mentioned how hard work, we had all these committees, tests should come home. I'm still having teachers saying, oh, you can't get the test. They're telling the kids this. So it's just, now we're going to talk about other committees and other issues coming to hand, and you have to have that honest conversation with your staff, because without that, all this that we're doing here is not going to work.
Could you try to wrap it up, please?
Sure, no problem. If you do not have buy-in, so you say, but with correct support, there's going to be fallings coming from every which angle. And I don't want my child to experience that, especially with the tax dollars that we're paying. Thank you.
Good evening, Chris Bradley, Willow Grove. I just want to say how much I appreciate everyone's efforts here tonight on behalf of our children. I love the high level of discussion with the new initiatives as far as co-teaching and also coaching. I know many other districts implement these very well, and they're having some great success. I have two things I'd like to bring to the Education Committee's attention tonight. And the first one is the issue of reporting data to parents in a parent-friendly way. The data in my child's evaluation report, reevaluation report, and annual IEP is not reported in a way that is readable to me. The majority of scores are reported in a narrative format. At times, when charts are used, there are no discernible columns and rows, and nothing is lined up. The testing dates, the raw scores, the scaled scores, and the percentages are indecipherable unless they are transcribed by me or my husband into a chart or graph. Through my work with SPEAK, the Special Education Advisory Council of Upper Dublin, I have learned that most parents also struggle to understand their child's test scores because it's presented to them in such a sloppy, haphazard, and careless way. It is extremely important for all members of a child's IEP team, which includes parents as well as teachers, to understand the data that the evaluations and assessments provide. If this data is not presented clearly, how can an IEP team make informed decisions about goals? I'd also like to note that this concern was brought to the attention previously by SPEAK to the Special Education Administration in September, to a few members of the school board in October, and also to Dr. Wheeler. The second part of what I'd like to let parents and teachers and board members know is that on March 30th, the Special Education Advisory Council is hosting a meeting here at 7 o'clock, and the topic is inclusion. My child in special education has a right to be in a general education class. My child is not the only child that benefits from being in that class. Other children benefit from my child as well. Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, we will close the community input and try to answer questions.
Yes, I can begin with Mrs. Vitella around co-teaching. We have the same number of, pretend that I can see you because it feels funny answering your question. We have the same number of special education students each year, and many of our special education students are in regular education. With the move to restructure 9th grade, our staff and I believe members of our community asked for more support. And so we're putting that support in through various means, including co-teaching. We are currently co-teaching in 6th grade and 7th grade and 8th grade. I believe we're co-teaching in 9th grade in mathematics. So it's not necessarily new, but I do think we're getting smarter about co-teaching. And because we want this 9th grade initiative to go well, we are being especially careful that staff is ready to hit the ground running in September. And if that's not completely of help, I would love to talk to you afterwards. Mrs. Cologne, I do recognize, and I've heard this before, that there is a difference in level of difficulty between middle school and high school. And I guess to some degree, but not to the degree that it would be punitive, it should get harder as students get older. also, I think that as students enter high school and beyond, they're starting to develop an affinity to certain subject areas where they may perhaps excel over others. With that in mind, though, there should not be an abrupt difference between 8th and 9th grade. In fact, when you think about transition between schools, 8th grade should look a whole lot like 9th grade. 5th grade should look a whole lot like 6th grade, and there should be sort of a slow growth beyond the transition. We have put things into place, and I do believe that we are in a better place than we were last year or the year before. So one of the things around specifically having 8th and 9th grade teachers get together to look at exemplars of student work happened this year. In January, we had our 9th grade teachers go down to Sandy Run with specific student works to share. This is what an assignment and assessment looks like in 9th grade in biology, sharing that with the 8th grade science teachers. This is what it looks like in other subject areas. And I do think those conversations give teachers the opportunity to adjust accordingly. The other thing I would say is that with the look at the grading policy at the high school and aligning it better to the grading policy of the middle school may help that differential in grades, so that we may see a difference with that, and that's what I'm hoping. In terms of staff members not following the protocol around test sharing, again, I would really urge you to contact building administrators. I think that we all would feel some frustration if you're feeling that frustration, and that if there is a test to be shared, I believe everyone knows what the policy is, and that test should be shared. With the CDT information, I have a feeling there may be a communication gap. When we first started giving CDTs, I think we made a much better effort to alert parents, and I believe that the protocol was that if you're giving a CDT, alert parents that it's happening, and they may, particularly at the secondary level, and then they may request the information. There was never the idea that we would send the information to parents. There's always the idea that students would take the CDT and then we would conference with the students afterwards. Again, if that isn't happening, subject area coordinator would be the first person who could look after that to make sure. And I guess what I would say is that a lot of things have been put into place. It takes a large system like ours time to respond to it, and I know that can be frustrating, but you're actually very helpful when you let us know that things aren't happening so that we can make sure that they do happen.
Mrs. Clegg, do you want to respond to Mrs. Bradley's questions?
Sure. First thing I'd like to say is the evaluation report and the reevaluation report, which are very important comprehensive documents that outline the strengths and needs of students. Nothing takes the place of the personalized feedback that comes with those reports. So the first thing I really want to stress is that our psychologists, our special education teachers for the reevaluation reports really provide comprehensive feedback to families regarding the reports. That's outside of the actual written document. There are multiple opportunities for parents, the evaluators, and the educators to have those conversations to make sure that there is a comprehensive understanding of the document. The IEP Plus system that we use to actually write and document the reports comes with its limitations, and we recognize that. We've worked with the psychologists about how to do that better, particularly when there are charts involved, because that's the place where you will see if you just cut and paste a chart into those documents, you'll have a problem. We can just attach them as attachments to the document. They don't have to be cut and pasted into the document. So that is one way to address it. The IEP Plus program will not allow for charts. It just makes, it is a mess. And so we have looked to the psychologist to just add them as attachments to the document. But again, that's really secondary to the importance of having those conversations with the parents to make sure that no parent walks away with a non-understanding of their child's reports. Third, the IEPs. We have put in a protocol in place this year where drafts have to be provided to parents at least 3 days prior to an IEP team.
And that's really helped a lot too, so that when you have the IEP meeting, the productivity of that conversation is further enhanced because parents come with their questions. They've already had the IEP in their hands for at least 3 days prior to the meeting, so you can answer any questions that parents might have at that meeting, so that, again, no one walks away with a misunderstanding. Lastly, and I know when it has been brought up by Speak to Us, we can't stress enough the importance of families or parents, if they have a concern regarding their child's report or the way the IEP was written or the misunderstanding, that they address it directly to the IEP team, the LEA in the building, and the teachers or the psychologist involved. We have well over 400 families who have students with children that have IEPs. We're not getting an overwhelming response from families saying that there are issues, but if there are, and I believe that there may be, we can't stress enough how important it is for the parents to go directly to that LEA or team to say, I don't understand this, or this doesn't look right to me, so that we can work at it individually as teams and not necessarily overgeneralize that it's a larger problem than it is. As far as inclusion,
I was just curious, the IEP plus software, are there any other options that are, quote, friendlier?
I mean, there's IEP Writer. There are a lot of other programs out there. The benefit of IEP Plus, and Phil can elaborate too, is it connects with the eSchools and the other programs. So if you did take another program, it would go outside of the capacity of the communication that we have with all of them being bundled. As far as inclusion, we share in the support that inclusion is necessary, it's important, and it is absolutely incumbent upon the IEP teams to individually discuss for each student where the LRE is for that student based on their strengths and needs. It's built right within the IEP document. There's a section at the end of the document, and purposefully it's at the end of the document because after you go through the strengths and the needs and the goals and the specially designed instruction, the team has to say, where will the student's needs, all of this be done within a least restrictive environment, and you examine the continuum from least restrictive environment, which is regular ed, with supports and services, through the continuum all the way up to a full-time placement. That conversation happens every time for every student, every IEP meeting.
Thank you. I think we've addressed all the questions. Is there anything else?
Well, it wasn't exactly a question, but I'm going to ask one based on it. Mrs. Vitella commented that it seems to her that newer aids seem to be more specific to one child than to the classroom. And so my question is, I think I just want to confirm, we haven't changed any policy around that. That is either a local phenomenon or specific to those particular kids or something, right? Want me to repeat that?
Sorry, there was some confusion. I didn't know. I had planned on taking that question,
like, what?
and I was giving really bad nonverbal cues there. I would just point out that there's some delineation between our assistants. We have people who are so-called one-on-ones, who their one assignment is actually one child. It's written into that child's IEP. I do not know. It's an interesting idea that there's somehow a correlation between newer assistants, which is what I heard, and being more likely to be assigned as in a one-on-one capacity. That would be new information to me, but there is some delineation in terms of the responsibility. We have paraprofessional staff members who are not assigned to special education responsibilities at all, really, but within the realm of special education, we have people who are assigned to one student. We can also have a one-on-two, if you will, which is, there might be 2 students in that class, but there's sort of a range.
But nothing new in terms of policy or structure or anything?
No, I would want to stress that, when we have special education paraprofessionals, aides that are used, dedicated specifically to special education, they're there for they're supporting the programs. We have a wide variety: emotional support, life skill support, all those programs. Some programs require an aide with the teacher within those programs all the time. We also have aides that support students within the inclusive setting. Again, in the support of inclusion, sometimes students can be included in the general ed, but they need somebody with them. So we use them for that capacity as well. It's really important to understand that an aide is never intended to deliver initial instruction. It's for reinforcement of previously taught skills.
So I heard a little bit about like co-teaching and their involvement in co-teaching, and within they wouldn't be co-teaching. You know, that's a teacher's role, but a paraprofessional, once it's taught, can be used in a supportive role for reinforcement of previously taught skills. So that's their academic support. Sometimes we have students who require a behavior plan, and an aide will support within the data collection and implementation of behavior plans. And we also have students who have functional needs, toileting, feeding, mobility, et cetera, where it's more of a comprehensive role for that aide to support individual students. So there's a wide variety, but they're all reflected within the IEP.
Great, thanks.
Any final comments from anyone?
I just want to announce following the adjournment tonight, the board will be moving into executive session to discuss personnel matters.
Thank you. If that's it, we're adjourned. Thank you.